There comes a moment, quiet and unspectacular, when a human being looks into the mirror and something subtle yet irreversible happens. The reflection does not betray them. It simply tells the truth. The face staring back is familiar, and yet not quite known. Behind the eyes lives a stranger who carries your memories but not your certainty. And in that fracture, that instant where recognition falters, something ancient awakens. It isn't failure that whispers from the glass. It's a silence, heavy and tender, that says, something has gone missing. Not lost, missing, as if it still lingers somewhere, waiting to be remembered. That's how transformation begins. Not with the triumph of discovery, but with the ache of absence. Change, people think, is an event, a choice, a vow, a sudden sunrise of will. But no. True change is the slow unmaking of a self that once believed it was whole. It is not the building of something new, but the quiet dismantling of what no longer belongs. Beneath every transformation, before the phoenix ever burns, there is disassembly, a psychological revolution that begins in the dark. We like to name the turning points, to carve them into stories so they feel manageable. That's when it all changed, we say. But transformation doesn't announce itself like that. It moves through you invisibly, in the restless nights, the wordless sighs, the hollow feeling you can't quite locate. It happens when the surface of your life still looks intact, but the foundation below it begins to tremble. Carl Jung called it individuation, the gathering of the scattered self into something whole. Maslow described it as self-actualization, the slow blooming of one's full potential once the hunger of survival is sated. But even those grand words fall short, because transformation isn't a theory, it's a wound, learning how to breathe again. It begins the moment the pain of staying the same outweighs the comfort of the familiar. Most people never arrive there consciously. They circle their own patterns like planets bound by invisible gravity. Childhood voices echo as commandments. Family, culture, memory, all weaving invisible walls around what they believe is possible. I'm not enough. It's too late. People like me don't change. Such phrases seem harmless, but they are architecture. Psychological cement hardens around the self until you mistake the walls for your skin. And then, one day, awareness arrives, not as a shout, but as a whisper. What if it isn't true? That question alone can begin to unravel the entire structure. Because awareness, as small and delicate as it seems, is rebellion. The moment you see the pattern, you are no longer its prisoner. Neuroscientists call it plasticity, the brain's quiet miracle, its ability to rearrange its own shape. Every conscious act of defiance against an old belief rewires the circuitry. Each new thought builds a bridge over old terrain. The mind is not marble, it is water, and it moves according to the shape of your attention. Yet we resist. We crave the rewards of change without enduring its friction. We want the new self, but not the death of the old one. But discomfort, that trembling uncertainty, is not failure. It is the sound of the ego losing its throne. The ego's only task is stability. It fears chaos because chaos is where its authority dissolves. That's why growth feels like collapse. The old mind is fighting for its survival, even as the soul yearns to evolve. Every time you try to rise early, eat differently, love better, and then fall back, it's not laziness. It's identity preservation. The mind clings to what it knows, even when it hurts. Cognitive homeostasis, scientists call it. the psyche's devotion to continuity. And so, transformation cannot begin with new habits alone. It must begin with a new story of self. Identity precedes action. To behave differently, one must first imagine being different. If you tell yourself you're disorganized, you can tidy the room, but chaos will return, like a loyal dog. If you believe you're bad with money, the numbers will always slip through your fingers, no matter how you plan. But shift the identity. Say instead, I am learning to care for what I touch, and the world slowly rearranges itself to match that truth. Transformation is an identity project disguised as self-improvement. Every act of growth, every healing, every forgiveness, begins with rewriting the question, who am I? The path of transformation is not linear. It loops, circles, hesitates. It feels like walking through fog, progress, doubt, regression, clarity, renewal. Like the tides, each retreat prepares for a deeper surge. Joseph Campbell named this pattern long ago, the hero's journey. But the hero's enemies are rarely dragons. They are internal: fear, inertia, self-deception. The hero must die symbolically before rebirth, crossing that uncertain middle ground where everything familiar dissolves. Psychologists call this the liminal phase, the threshold between identities. It's the in-between space, where the old self has fallen apart and the new one has not yet solidified. You are neither here nor there. It feels like drifting through the ruins of your own understanding. The brain reflects this, too. During deep transformation, the default mode network, the part of the brain that tells the story of you, becomes hyperactive. It's the mind rewriting its myth, editing the narrative to make sense of new awareness. Every time you imagine a new version of yourself, the neurons spark and rearrange, carving a path for a new story to live. Believe, and you will become, they say. And though it sounds poetic, it is also biological. Belief is not abstract. It is a pattern of firing in the neural dark. Repeat it enough times, with feeling, and it becomes reality's scaffold. But belief resists deceit. The subconscious knows the difference between a script and sincerity. You can't fool your inner witness. You can't chant affirmations while secretly disbelieving them. That's why transformation demands radical honesty before discipline. You must see yourself as you are, not as you wish to appear. To look inward without judgment, here's what hurts, here's what I've hidden, is to clean a wound so it can heal. Painful, yes, but pain that purifies is not cruelty. It's truth, rearranging the bones. Most self-help promises redemption through effort. But effort without self-acceptance becomes violence. You cannot evolve by attacking what you are. Integration, not correction, is the art of change. Transformation is reconciliation, the meeting of all your disowned selves at the same table. Even procrastination, that soft enemy of dreams, is rarely about laziness. It's fear in disguise. Fear of failure, of success, of being seen. When that fear is met with compassion, the armor falls. The behavior doesn't need to be fought. It simply dissolves when it no longer has to protect the wounded part underneath. That is how we heal, not through war with the self, but through reunion. Transformation begins where resistance ends, but it deepens where emotion is allowed to speak. Most of us have been trained to outrun our own feelings, to label them as weakness, to tidy them away before they make a mess of our composure. Yet emotion is the bloodstream of transformation, the silent alchemy through which the psyche digests experience into wisdom. Anger, sadness, anxiety, these are not flaws in the system. They are messages from the underground. Anger says, something sacred has been crossed. Sadness whispers, you have lost something that mattered. Anxiety trembles, you stand at the edge of the unknown. When we listen, when we stay with those sensations long enough for their language to unfold, we begin to understand that emotion is not chaos. It's compass. To feel is to participate in your own becoming. And yet, feeling requires courage, because emotion, when honestly met, strips away illusion. It exposes the architecture of your life, the compromises, the fears, the identities held together by pretense. You see what is real and what is merely performed. This is why mindfulness and self-compassion are not luxuries of the spiritual elite. They are tools of survival for those walking the path of change. Neuroscience shows what the mystics always knew. Kindness calms the storm. When you hold your pain gently, when you breathe through discomfort rather than fight it, the brain's alarm system quiets, and a new clarity emerges. You become able to choose, not react, not defend, but choose. That is the birth of freedom. And freedom is rarely explosive. It is subtle. It appears in the smallest acts. The pause before a familiar reaction. The breath before an old apology. The simple act of saying no when fear used to say yes. Each of these is a micro-rebellion, a moment in which a lifetime of conditioning loses its grip. We think of revolutions as loud, but the psyche's revolutions are quiet. They happen behind closed eyes, in the hush between thoughts. You will not always see the change as it happens. It reveals itself later, when the storm passes, and you realize you no longer flinch where you used to, no longer chase what once controlled you. Look back someday, and you will find that the person you've become would be unrecognizable to your former self. That is not betrayal, it's evolution. The paradox of transformation is that it is both destruction and return. You do not become something new. You remember what you were before fear began to edit you. Every human life begins with adaptation. As children, we learn the choreography of acceptance. We notice what earns affection and what provokes withdrawal. Slowly, we craft a mask, a socially acceptable self that fits the expectations of our small world. It protects us. It also imprisons us. Over time, that mask begins to speak for us. It smiles when the heart aches. It nods when the soul resists. It becomes fluent in survival, and we forget there was ever a face beneath it. The journey of transformation begins when that mask cracks, not violently, but inevitably. Maybe through loss, or love, or quiet exhaustion. The performance can no longer sustain itself. The false self, no matter how polished, starts to feel like borrowed skin. And in that rupture, the ancient question returns. Who am I beneath all this? The ego fears that question. It hears it as annihilation. But what dissolves is not the self, only the illusion of separateness. Jung called it the death of the persona. Mystics call it awakening. Either way, it is the moment the mirror stops lying. You stop defending your opinions as if they are oxygen. You stop needing to win every argument. You stop mistaking control for safety. You start observing rather than performing. And somewhere within that observation, the edges soften. Transformation ceases to feel like striving. It begins to feel like remembering. You don't create authenticity, you uncover it. But even authenticity is not static. It breathes, it expands and contracts. Who you are today is not who you were yesterday, and that is not inconsistency, it is aliveness. To live truthfully is to allow the self to change shape without shame. Identity, the psychologists remind us, is narrative, a story written in wet ink. Transformation simply means realizing you are the author, not the character. True change asks for sacrifice, not of morality or comfort, but of certainty. Every evolution demands that you disappoint some version of yourself, and often the people who preferred that version. You will lose friends who needed you smaller. You will confuse those who found safety in your predictability. You will frighten the parts of yourself that equate familiarity with love. And you will grieve, because growth is a kind of death, the funeral of what no longer serves. Before the liberation comes mourning, for the dreams that belonged to the old self, for the innocence of ignorance, for the illusions that once made the world simple. Yet, in the hollow that grief carves, space is made for clarity. You begin to see that every ending is an invitation in disguise. Life, in its brutal tenderness, does not take without also offering. Every broken piece becomes soil for something raw and real. But the process hurts because emotion, as physics teaches us, cannot be destroyed. Suppressed feelings don't disappear, they ferment. They twist into anxiety, tension, projections. When you finally allow transformation, those buried emotions rise like ghosts. That's why awakening feels like chaos. The past rushing to the surface, demanding closure. You cry, you tire, you ache. Not because you're broken, but because you're clearing the debris of unexpressed life. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget. Healing is exorcism through tenderness. Each tear, each tremor, each silence is the psyche releasing its old weather. And when the storm finally passes, you notice something strange. Time feels different. The future no longer shimmers in the distance as a prize to chase. It unfolds from the present, quietly, naturally. You stop striving and start allowing. Transformation shifts you from ambition to alignment. You no longer try to become someone. You simply are, in motion, but not in panic. Paradoxically, that's when change accelerates, because the self that stops grasping begins to grow freely. Transformation is rarely cinematic. It does not arrive with fireworks. It creeps through the ordinary. You wake one morning, and the noise in your head is softer. A conversation that once would have wounded you now passes like wind through open windows. To others, it may look like nothing has changed. They may see stillness, even withdrawal. But underneath, neurons are rethreading, beliefs dissolving, stories rewriting themselves. The garden is growing in the dark. The world teaches us to value spectacle, to equate progress with motion. But the soul evolves in stillness. The truest revolutions happen in silence, while reading, walking, writing, breathing. And then one day, you no longer feel like you're becoming someone new. You feel like you've come home. The war inside quiets. What used to trigger you now invites curiosity instead. You speak without rehearsing. You choose peace without explanation. There's a steadiness, not immunity to pain, but intimacy with it. You understand its place in the ecosystem of your humanity. Psychologists might call this integration, the emotional and rational brains finally in harmony. It is the marriage of instinct and insight, of chaos and calm. You stop reacting. You begin to respond. Every impulse becomes an opportunity for awareness. That's the maturity transformation brings. Not perfection, but coherence. Transformation is not a ladder you climb. It is a spiral that pulls you deeper into the same center each time, only with more awareness. You revisit the same lessons, the same wounds, the same mirrors, but they no longer wound you in the same way. You meet them with a little more grace, a little more silence. What once broke you now becomes teacher. What once terrified you becomes map. You begin to understand that evolution is not escape, it's participation. You are not rising above your humanity, you are sinking into it, tenderly, courageously. Each cycle brings you closer to truth, and truth is not a fixed point. It is a living thing, shifting with the tides of your own becoming. There's a line from Viktor Frankl that lingers like a bell through the corridors of time. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. That is the quiet law of existence. Life will hand you what it will. Love and loss, joy and decay, beginnings dressed as endings. You cannot bargain with it. But you can decide what each experience will mean. The same fire that destroys can illuminate. The same darkness that blinds can teach you to see. Transformation, then, is not control. It is surrender to meaning. The moment you stop trying to rearrange the universe and begin instead to reimagine your place within it, you find peace. Pain does not vanish, but it becomes purposeful. It chisels you into shape. Every scar becomes a constellation marking where you once burned and now shine. There will come another moment, as certain as breath, when the horizon ahead feels blurred again. The self you worked so hard to build begins to tremble. A new threshold appears. Confusion returns, not as punishment, but as invitation. This is the rhythm of becoming. Each clarity births its own mystery. Just when you think you've arrived, life hands you another doorway with no map. You stand there, trembling between identities once more. The old you too small, the new you still unborn. And that trembling, that exquisite uncertainty, is sacred. It means the architecture of your inner world is being redrawn. The scaffolding is falling so something truer can rise. Do not rush this phase. Stay awake through it. The mind will panic. It will crave labels, conclusions, closure. But awareness, simple, patient awareness, is the bridge that carries you across. Everything you've ever called becoming was just awareness learning to love itself in new forms. Eventually, transformation stops being something you do. It becomes the texture of your living. You no longer crave rebirth because life itself is an unending series of them. Small, invisible renewals unfolding between each breath. You learn that change need not be dramatic to be divine. It happens in the way you forgive a little sooner, listen a little longer, breathe a little deeper. You begin to outgrow without discarding, to evolve without erasing. Your life ceases to be a project and becomes a process, a moving prayer, whispered through every gesture of awareness. You no longer need to chase meaning. You embody it. You live as if existence itself were a conversation, and your only task is to respond truthfully. To be awake even for a moment is to be transformed. And you realize then that transformation was never about becoming extraordinary. It was about noticing that the ordinary, when seen without illusion, is already holy. Imagine it now, as if on a screen, a human figure standing before a mirror, the same mirror where this all began. The light is softer this time. The reflection doesn't accuse, it listens. The voice inside, once trembling with questions, now speaks with quiet understanding. It says, "I did not fix myself. I learned to see myself. I did not become new. I remembered what I am. I did not escape the pain. I befriended it. And in that friendship, I found freedom." The camera pulls back, slowly, almost reverently, revealing that the mirror was never a mirror at all but a window. Beyond it stretches a landscape vast and alive, filled with the echoes of every life we've ever lived, every self we've ever been. The voice continues, softer now, like a confession between souls. All my life I thought transformation meant changing who I was, but now I see it meant allowing who I am to breathe through everything I do. I am not the person I expected to become. I am the story that keeps rewriting itself. I am the silence between each realization. I am the rhythm of remembering. The screen fades, not to black, but to light. A slow, luminous dissolve, because transformation never ends. It only changes color. Each breath you take is another beginning. Each moment of awareness, another awakening. And somewhere inside that infinite unfolding, you are already everything you were meant to be.